me a favor, and if they haven't already, go ahead and mute your mic. With that, I'd like to go ahead and welcome everyone to the Offshore Wind Town Hall. I want to start this evening by shouting out our co-sponsors. This event would not be possible without them. We have the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, Sierra Club Maryland Chapter, Progressive Maryland, Indivisible Worcester Maryland, the Maryland Legislative Coalition, the Democratic Women's Club of Worcester County, All Revolution Maryland, the Democratic Club of Wacomico County, the Dorchester Democratic Central Committee, Kent and Queen Anne's Indivisible Maryland, the Wacomico County Democratic Central Committee, the Progressive Maryland Network, and our joint co-host tonight, the Business Network for Offshore Wind. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce the first speaker for tonight. Sam is the Maryland Director for coalitions with the Business Network for Offshore Wind. They are a 501c3 national headquartered here in Maryland. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend Sam, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to him.
Thanks so much, Jared. I really appreciate it. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a little presentation here. And just make sure I don't screw it up. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Salustro, and I work with the Business Network for Offshore Wind. We're an education nonprofit, and our goal is we believe in the power of offshore wind to create jobs, strengthen the economy, and improve the quality of life for all of our citizens. And to that end, our mission is help develop offshore wind here in Maryland, all over the United States, and build out the supply chain, so supporting businesses who are getting into the offshore wind industry. We accomplish that by providing market information, education, tools like this one here, and introductions and networking for businesses. We have 300 members, and we're proud to say that the network is the largest nonprofit organization solely focused on developing offshore wind. So I wanted to thank you for being here today. I'm going to give a short, like half-hour-ish overview of offshore wind, what it means for Maryland and what it means for you. And then we're going to do some question and answers, because this is a brand new industry. So there's just going to be a lot of questions about what it is and what it means. So this is me. Feel free to email me anytime. I'm sure I'm going to get in a question tonight that I don't know the answer to, and I will follow up with you. But feel free to reach out for anything that you have. So let's start by asking, what is offshore wind? Offshore wind is not new at all. It's construction of wind farms in bodies of water, and we generate electricity from the wind with these turbines. Offshore wind energy it's a proven industry, but it is still very much evolving. And it's 30 years old. The first offshore wind farms were built in Denmark in 1991. And today alone, there's over 5,000 turbines just in Europe alone. Wind technology is not new to any of us. We've seen windmills all over the world. If you've been anywhere in the Midwest or in the South, or even here in Western Maryland, you've seen onshore wind turbines. Offshore wind is just the same concept, harnessing the wind for power purposes. Windmills, you use it to churn grain and to low power a little machine. Offshore wind is just doing the same concept, but using it to generate renewable electricity instead. Like I said, we've all become very familiar with onshore wind. Offshore wind is different though. First of all, it's on water, it's not on land. It's much bigger. So each of these turbines are capable of harnessing a lot more electricity and energy potential, much more than our onshore components. And the main reason for that is ocean wind blows a lot steadier. It blows a lot more consistently, and in the industry, we call it a capacity factor, but offshore wind has a higher capacity factor than onshore wind. Everything about an offshore wind turbine is much bigger, and at the same time, it makes development very long and very slow. We've been talking about offshore wind here in the state of Maryland for nearly a decade. And we're still a couple years from actually having these built in the water, 20 miles off the coast of Maryland. This is a nice little video that really captures exactly how offshore wind farms work and how turbines work. So we're going to watch it.
We humans have harnessed the power of wind for agricultural and industrial purposes for centuries. Today, however, wind is used as an affordable, renewable and climate-friendly electricity source. At Ørsted, we built offshore wind farms across the planet to bring green energy to millions of people. But how does it work? Naturally, a wind farm needs wind to generate energy. So we find locations where wind conditions are optimal, water depths are shallow enough for us to fix the turbines to the seabed, and there is enough space to install hundreds of huge turbines. The largest of our turbines have a rotor diameter of over 167 meters and stand 195 meters tall. The sea winds are captured by their giant blades and transformed into energy inside the nacelle. The rotating blades cause the main shaft to rotate, with a gearbox transferring the rotational speed to a high-speed shaft. This turns very rapidly, which allows the generator to generate electricity by spinning a magnet past coils of conductive wire. This process is known as electromagnetism. The electricity generated from all of the turbines in the wind farm is then fed to a single offshore substation, which then transports the energy to shore via high-voltage cables. Once inland, the electricity is transformed at the onshore substation and fed into the public grid, where it is ready to power the lives of millions of people. Since we built the world's first
And that's a great video. Minute and a half goes over exactly how electricity is created and fed into the system. We've gone over what offshore wind is. Now we want to talk about why we're talking about offshore wind. What is the reasons why we want to do it here in Maryland? And the first and sort of biggest one is job creation. Job creation is a super important factor in the growth and adaptation of offshore wind here in the United States. We know from Europe, which I've said has been building offshore wind turbines for 30 years now, it's supported about 40,000 jobs in Europe so far. We believe here in America, the White House has estimated, a couple of other organizations in support of wind have estimated that it will create about 80,000 jobs here in the United States. And that's based off the commitments that we have right now. That's not even, future commitments, and if it keeps on growing. Offshore wind projects are extremely complex and are only completed after years of development, which requires a bunch of different stages. And then once they're built, they are operational for 20 to 25 years at least. So that's a continuous job creation flow that's going to exist. These are all sorts of different jobs. You have to survey the ocean, you have to build the foundations, you have to build the nacelles, which was in that video, and the blades. Then you have to bring it out into the ocean and very carefully assemble it. When they're doing this often requires the work of dozens of ships at a time. So that's jobs for construction workers, welders, tradespeople, ship captains, electricians, cable installers, port administrators. And these are all good paying jobs that are going to really help the communities where these jobs are created. To give you a sense of the scale of these things and how hard it is to build them and how complex it is and why you need very skilled labor to be able to do it. Second video, we're only going to show about a minute or so of this.
All the time together. We are very blessed with having a lot of good colleagues in the company. When I'm out there, I also need to have my inside calculator ready, making sure that we're doing everything as cost efficient as possible. time is money in this business, so we will need to cut down on time wherever we can.
So each of those blades is the size of a football field. That's how big these things are. And as you can see, it's a very high-tech and very intense industry that needs a lot of skilled labor to be able to complete it. So we talked about jobs. Offshore wind is extremely important to helping solve climate change and developing renewable energy in general. First, offshore wind, we call it a utility scale industry, which means it can replace entire power plants. It can also, so it's going to be a clean energy source that's able to power entire cities because it uses the wind to generate electricity rather than burning a fossil fuel. Now, this first chart on the left-hand side, this is RPS goals by state. And what an RPS goal is, it is a state law that says a state has to derive so much energy from renewable sources by a date. So the dark blue areas are 100% RPS goal states. The light blue is about 50% goal RPS states. Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Hampshire, they have their own goals. It's just, it's like 35% or something like that. That means that at some point they're going to need renewable energy sources. And you can use wind, you can use solar, you can use nuclear, but offshore wind is one of those things that it can use. On the right is a little map, and this is decommissioning coal and nuclear power plants. Now we know that a lot of coal plants are going offline for environmental reasons, but also cost reasons. We know a lot of nuclear plants are going offline because of age, and we're going to need power from somewhere. Offshore wind is one of those places that can replace entire power plants. And how much can it replace? Currently, there's 1.6 gigawatts of power in offshore wind power in development. In development means that they've secured a financial stake and they're going through a permitting process. And it's just like they just need final permitting approval and they're going to start building these things. So that amount can replace just about 20 coal plants. It can replace 10 or 11 nuclear power plants, and it can replace 14 natural gas power plants. Finally, why are we talking about it here in Maryland? We talked about job creation. We talked about its ability to help solve renewable energy needs. It's also geographically a great location. Chart on the left is the United States. It's the night sky. Everyone uses electricity, and you really want to have 1/3 of the U.S. population lives right along the East Coast, creating an enormous, huge demand for electricity. And that's important because it's really hard to transport electricity over long distances. You've all seen those huge electrical towers all over the place, but the further you are away from a power source, the more that the power degrades. Second, and like we talked about before, offshore winds blow at a much more consistent and stronger factor than some onshore wind. So this map in the middle, the darker, the reds and the blues and the purples show that wind speed exists all the time. Finally, we have a very large continental shelf right off our waters. And that's important because you need to anchor these into the ground somehow. So having a very short buildable continental shelf makes the entire thing much cheaper and much better. Okay, where are we with offshore wind here in the United States? Well, we have 7 turbines total. We have 2 projects in the United States. Block Island Wind Farm on the left-hand side. Block Island is a tourist destination in Rhode Island. And on the right is the Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind. They only have 2 turbines, and that's more of an experimental, it's more of a testing or an experimental project, and they're going to build a much bigger farm right behind it. But in the meantime, they want to kind of stand a couple up so they can learn how to do it and get some lessons learned. This is a chart of the installed power capacity around the world. And you can't even see the United States on here. We just don't have offshore wind at, and on a big scale here in the United States. So you can see that who is leading the world is the United Kingdom, it's Germany, and it's China. And this chart was last updated in 2019. In the last year, this curve has continued to grow exponentially. The rest of the world is really investing in this. The rest of the world is pushing ahead, and we're getting left behind in the process. But we are developing. Again, this is another map showing states and their commitments to offshore wind development. So the darker the shade, the more that they've committed to using offshore wind. In total, like I said, that it's 11.6 gigawatts have received some sort of financial offtake right now. The United States has essentially committed to 3 times that amount. But it takes time, like I said, it takes time to go through a federal permitting process. There's some state permitting processes and some state procurement processes, and it takes time to do this. So we have these projects that are moving forward. These green areas are projects that, like I said, have received some sort of financial commitment from states, and they're essentially just going through a federal permitting process right now. The yellow areas are places that haven't yet received that financial offtake, but it is leased and potentially available for development. And then these orange areas are areas that are still, the federal government is still doing some survey work, some review work, some research work to make sure that these things are appropriate for development. It's important to really call our attention to this federal permitting process. I've talked a little bit about how long this all takes. It's because there's a ton of work that goes into meeting with stakeholders and doing reports just like the federal government does. And I have another video because all of these projects are taking place, 15 miles off the shore. It is done under the jurisdiction of the federal government, and specifically the Department of Interior's Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And this is a good video that really goes through all of the permitting steps that are needed before we can actually build any of these things. And I'm gonna...
Our nation is a busy place. Any proposed development on the OCS, BOEM evaluates the potential impacts on ocean users, historical and cultural resources, and the marine environment. BOEM uses a multi-phased process to grant access to ocean areas suitable for wind energy development. First, BOEM identifies potential areas for wind energy leasing. Some considerations include wind strength, proximity to places that need energy, and other uses of the ocean in the area, like military needs, shipping, and fishing. There are also discussions with stakeholders, tribes, and local, state, and federal government agencies. Then, BOEM gauges industry interest in developing the area and begins reviewing the possible environmental impacts of development. This is the first of many opportunities to provide your insight, which is essential to help identify areas that should be considered for future offshore wind development. BOEM wants to hear from you. Then, BOEM holds an auction, and companies that are interested in developing offshore wind energy submit bids to try to win the right to potentially develop in the area. After leases are awarded, companies conduct surveys and studies to learn more about their lease areas. They submit detailed site assessment plans for BOEM's review. Next, the companies submit a construction and operations plan, or project proposal, for a prospective offshore wind facility. During this phase, BOEM conducts extensive environmental and technical reviews to determine possible impacts before approving or disapproving the plans. Only after all 4 phases are completed can actual construction on the facilities begin. Public engagement, including meetings, comments, and discussions, is a critical component throughout each of these phases. The process to develop wind energy on the ocean takes time, coordination, and consultation. It takes working with people, states, towns, tribes, and current ocean users. It also involves understanding and studying the environment and potential risks. It's not an easy task, but it's an important one. Our nation's need for safe, reliable, and affordable energy continues to grow, and offshore wind can be an important part of our energy portfolio. Our nation is a
It's really important to call our attention to the number of studies and the amount of time that the federal government spends during this time. Depending on the size of a project, that could be between 175 to 200 reports and surveys and studies that are conducted. And it's because permitting agencies really want to understand that the impact of this project is going to have on the environment, on other industries and communities. The developers use vessels to survey the wind area and perform data collections. They study bird patterns. They study fish and shellfish habitats. And they often employ marine mammal observers to go out and observe whale migratory routes, or make sure that while they're doing any kind of work in the area that they're not impacting any sea mammals. Another one of these studies is studies on they call it human impact, but in particular is conversations about visual impact of offshore winds, of what they can have. And, we talked about how big these things actually are. So the federal government has these companies create computer simulations that should show and mimic what you can actually see when you're on the beach. Now, this is not Maryland. This is Massachusetts. And it is a wind project where the wind farm turbines are about 15 miles off the coast. Now, for comparison, the Maryland projects, one is 17 miles off the coast and one is 20 miles off the coast. So there's a somewhat of a fair approximation. And this is a summer day. So play a little bit of the video. It's got a nice background. What's kind of striking about this is the extent that you can't see these things. Even though that these turbines are extremely large, the distance, the curvature of the Earth, and most importantly, the atmospheric effects that you see on a day-to-day basis makes these turbines kind of hard to spot. Now, again, this is a summer day. Summer days are really, really hazy, and that water vapor really blocks objects near or at the horizon. Now, if you go onto the BOEM website, you can search for other days. They do winter days, they do fall days, they do dusk, and they do dawn. And other times of years, those are a little bit more visible. But for purposes, we're talking about when you go down to the shore and on vacation, this is sort of what you're going to see. Now, we talked about what, why, what's going on in the United States. Let's kind of bring it home here to Maryland. And we have currently 2 projects here in Maryland. Our Maryland Public Service Commission awarded ORECs to 2 projects located off the Maryland and Delaware coast to produce just about 400 megawatts of energy. That's about enough to power 100,000 homes here in Maryland. These are going to be the US Wind, Marwind project. They think it's going to be operational by 2024. The Skipjack project, which is going to be owned and operated by Ørsted. It's much more off the Delaware coast than the Maryland coast. That's expected operation is in 2026. And again, project on the left, the Marwind project off the Ocean City coast, up to 32 turbines, about 17 miles off the coast. The Ørsted project is going to be 12 turbines, about 19 miles off the coast. And I just used the term Maryland PSC and ORECs. What that is, the Maryland Public Service Commission is our state public utility board, and they govern the process of awarding ORECs, which are offshore wind renewable energy credits. Now, in 2017, the Maryland PSC awarded these ORECs to these 2 projects. It was a long review process. It started in February 2016. And what they did is they reviewed the pure cost, how much it's going to cost, you and me to have this electricity. They considered the social, health, environmental benefits, and they considered power savings. And as part of this, they're required to maintain a positive net economic benefit to the people of Maryland. So in awarding these ORECs to these two companies, they had conditions built in. First, they had to use Baltimore area and Ocean City port facilities for construction, for operations, and for maintenance activities. They had to invest about $100 million collectively in Port of Baltimore facilities, including a new steel fabrication plant, like a new steel manufacturing plant, or fabrication, which is changing the steel, and upgrades to the Trade Point Atlantic shipyard. These companies have to create 5,000 direct jobs here in the state of Maryland. And they have significant minority women and veteran-owned procurement goals, like significantly high minority women and veteran-owned procurement goals. What does this mean? For one thing, they said that Baltimore City has to be used as a staging and installation port. This is the Trade Point Atlantic port. This is the old Sparrows Point steel factory, for those of you who are familiar with it. And term installation port, it's used to describe a location where wind components are stored and prepared or assembled to some degree before being loaded onto an installation vessel. So you can use the term staging port, installation port. It's just about the same thing. Ocean City is going to be used as an operation and maintenance center. So that's a place where they're going to be constantly looking at data to ensure that the wind farms are operating in the way that they should. And if they're not, then they send out a technician to go, fix the wind turbine. And this is a fun little video about a company up in Rhode Island. But this is the kind of stuff that they're going to be running out of the port of the Ocean City port.
Well, I've always been someone that looks at the next thing. I'm an entrepreneur. I was the first to run a high-speed ferry to Block Island. I ran the first high-speed ferry to Martha's Vineyard. And to be the first crew transfer vessel in the United States was it's great to have that type of achievement behind you. I saw this as a next big economic driver for the state and where it's going to be going in the future. So I ended up getting the contract to build the Atlantic Pioneer, which was constructed at Blount Boats here in Warren, Rhode Island, and ultimately was the first crew transfer vessel in the United States. It's truly a homegrown, local-built wind farm, and it's definitely exciting to be part of that.
So I've kind of carved out a second career working with this boat. I watched them build the wind farms. I thought it would be real interesting at my age to get involved in this and be part of it. I mean, it's the first in North America. I think that's pretty significant. I'm pretty proud of that. When I travel elsewhere, I bring it up. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I drive a wind farm boat. Oh, what's that? I'm kind of like the Uber for these guys when they have to go out to the wind farm. I'm their Uber driver. There's like 3 or 4 other captains that run this boat. The younger guys are more excited about the future and the expansion of towers and new boats coming online.
It's nice to see that this is just the ground floor. I mean, there's a lot of other opportunities that are going to come up, not just here off Rhode Island in Massachusetts, but down the whole East Coast. We're hoping to.
So we talked about how offshore wind can create jobs, and I really want to wrap up today's presentation talking about that a little bit more. Like I said, the focus of our nonprofit is not only education, but really giving businesses the support they need in order to operate within this offshore wind industry. We talked about how the two projects have committed to creating 5,000 jobs here in Maryland. Some of those jobs are going to be around Baltimore. A lot of those jobs are going to be in Ocean City and in the Lower Shore area. But a lot of those jobs are going to be everywhere too. So this is a map of companies. We run a database where companies can indicate their support for offshore, or not their support for offshore wind. They can indicate their interest in being a company that provides some sort of offshore wind service. builds something, produces something, manufactures something. So this is a map of the businesses that have self-identified as being interested in this industry. And now to you, this is where you come in. If you liked what you heard here today, you can really help us build that future of offshore wind. You can become a consumer advocate. You can become an offshore wind advocate and talk about it on social media or in your networks, and stay up to date with the projects that are going on in Maryland. We're going to be hearing a lot more news in the next couple of years about these as they really get to the point where they're going to really be building and installing these components. And you help out by staying in the know. Now, real short thing here. If you are a business or you know of a business and you are interested in learning more about offshore wind and the opportunities that it has for you, or you know someone, send them our way. We have a number of products that are designed to help keep those businesses both educated, trained, and networked so they can participate in this industry. If nothing else, that database that I showed you with the map with the red dots all over the place, that's based off this. If you're a business at all interested, go on our website. We run this thing called a Supply Chain Connect. Input your company's information. This is a database that the developers and the tier one the manufacturers use to help them figure out what their local supply chain is going to be. And if you're extremely interested, we also run something called Foundation Blade. It's a 20-hour seminar where we really break down everything about an offshore wind farm for businesses so they know exactly what they can do, areas of opportunity for them, areas of diversification. So that is our little presentation. This is the time for question and answers. And I think that we're going to be having question and answers run through the chat. Like I said, I'm going to try to answer everything. I know that I'm not going to know a lot, or I'm going to not know every single thing. And feel free to either email me or I'll follow up with you to try and make sure that your answers are satisfactorily, you learn what you need to know. So Jared, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, we have quite a few questions, so I hope you're ready, Sam. The first question comes from Ryan. It says, generally, how much of the workforce is highly specialized and brought in from outside the region? And then the second part of the question is, what effects do the cables, blades, and vibrations have on the already stressed ocean ecosystem?
Let me start with the first one.
Okay.
How technical is it? So there's a lot of different facets of this. So there's a lot of stages. You need to do a lot of the survey work to see what is going on in the area. You need to do a lot of the construction work. You need to do a lot of the manufacturing work, the installation work, and the technician work. So there's a whole slew of jobs, and those are going to be all very, different skill levels are needed for all these different things. So the construction industry, the construction portion of it, it's going to be pretty highly specialized, but it's also going to need like the people around Maryland who already know how to do construction. We're very blessed in Maryland where we have a number of marine construction companies who are very good at building things out on the water, and they're going to be, they're already engaged. People who run survey boats, that's going to be a little bit more technical, but there's a lot of environmental consultants that live and work in Maryland. And then the manufacturing component, that's welders, so you need a specialization as a welder to show your abilities, but that's a welding job that you go to a trade school for. Electricians, that you go to a trade school. Now, a lot of these also are going to be offshore. Some of these jobs are going to be done offshore, and that's going to require a lot of certifications in order just to like step on a boat. And safety is a very paramount part of this industry. Safety is number one because they don't want anyone to get hurt while they're building and while they're maintaining these offshore wind farms. So there's a lot of training that will go into the people who actually have to work on the turbines itself.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but places like local education centers like Warwick, SU are also starting to start their own certification and training processes for offshore wind, correct?
Yes, there's actually a company in Salisbury. It's run by a woman named Katarina Enerfeld, and she runs the only United States education center where you get something called a GWO training. And GWO training is what I just talked about, which is if you're going to get on a boat to work on a turbine, you need this certification. It's an internationally understood certification that you need. And right there in Salisbury, we have a school that has already started receiving students who are looking for that certification, is already training the people. So it's already creating jobs in Salisbury as we speak.
Thank you. The second part was, what effects do the cables, blades, and vibrations have on the already stressed ocean ecosystem, even if minimized as much as possible?
So we talked a little bit about the BOEM permitting process, and they spend a lot of time conducting reports and conducting surveys and really trying to answer questions just like this. What the end point is that these things will be done in an environmentally responsible and safe manner. So just about every single, that's an extremely complex question because you're talking about 15 different possible effects that you have. They're going to go out and they're going to research every single one of those possible 15 effects. And they're not going to permit a project that they think is going to have a major adverse effect on the environment.
Thank you. The next question comes from Sam, and it says, beyond the not in my backyard type resistance, what potential dangers and accidents exist?
This is an industry that is extremely complex, and it's extremely risky from a financial standpoint. And you're dealing with a number of factors which makes development particularly hard. And our organization comes in because we're trying to lower some of those potential risks as much as possible. And one way that we do that is by educating and training a local supply chain, like I've been talking about. If we can run around, so like I said, there's only 7 turbines here in the United States. And that means we're lacking a lot of the expertise of how do we actually build these things. So my organization is essentially running around the state, running around the entire East Coast. We're finding businesses that have some experience, tangential experience, some direct experience, and we're getting them signed up, we're getting them educated, and we're getting them trained. So at least some of those risks that these companies, that the people who are trying to build these things, some of those risks are lowered. People know what certifications they have to get. People know what training they have to get. People are aware of the thing that they're going to build, and they've seen it built somewhere else. So it is rife with potential impacts, and due to its complexity, it has taken us 10 years to even get to this point where we're just talking about, we expect to start seeing construction happen in the next couple of years. But this has been going on for 10 years.
Thank you. The next question is from Christina, and it says, presumably all offshore wind development requires seismic drilling. I assume that's a question if that is a thing or not. And then what studies have been done on the impacts to ocean organisms during the development and during turbine use?
So not all of them require seismic drilling. They're actually using specialized platforms up in the state of New York, where I think they're called bucket platforms, and it's a thing of concrete, and they essentially just sink it down onto the bottom. There's a ton of studies that are being done to see what kind of impacts that these things, that offshore wind farms may have on animals. We were talking about whales a little bit before. Sound is a big consideration, and it's a consideration that everyone in the industry is extremely aware of and is extremely thoughtful about and trying to minimize as much as possible. So you will see that the federal government already doesn't allow you to do any kind of drilling in the ocean during certain time periods of the year, because that's the time periods that whales are usually using as a migratory avenue. But one of the projects up in Maryland is nearing final completion, and BOEM just released, I think it's like 3,000, 4,000 pages, and it's a accumulation of all these studies that have been looking into what are possible effects that construction and operations can have on marine animal life, on invertebrates in the ocean, on the land itself. So, they do all the studies, they come to the conclusion that they don't think that there's much impact at all. So they allow the projects to move forward. There's always going to be, during the construction phase, there's always going to be more of an impact, because you're actually you're putting something into the ground and you're setting it up, but that will only last for, a couple months at the most. And then from then on out, it's, the wind turbines just kind of go for 25 years. So what impacts they think will happen are all going to be very short-term impacts.
Thank you. And from my understanding, I believe it's the project up in Rhode Island or New York with the buckets, that schools of fish are actually starting to congregate around these structures.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jared. They just came out with a pretty big study a couple months ago looking at the Rhode Island project. So most of these studies are very theoretical. Most of these studies are really thinking about and studying what they think could possibly happen. We do have evidence of what has happened, though. The Rhode Island wind farm was built back in 2017, I think, 2016 or 2017. And we have seen a number of studies come out since then. And we're going to start seeing a lot more. And one, like you just said, one of the biggest things that they've seen is the fact that marine life really likes the foundation part of this. The invertebrates, and you can think of like the clams and the thing. They like barnacles. They like sticking to it, and it creates a very vibrant ecosystem around the base of the wind turbine. And they've actually been talking to sport fishermen, sort of the non-commercial fishermen. We call them sport fishermen. And they actually like fishing around there, because there's a lot more fish that usually hang out there, because there's a lot more food for the fish to eat around the turbine. So it's been getting positive reviews from sport fishermen. The only complaint that they've had, well, the main complaint that they've had at this point is it's actually getting too crowded, because everyone knows it's like the good fishing spot now. So everyone is going over there, and they're getting concerned that there's just too many boats moving around in a small area.
Thank you. The next question is, are there any offshore wind projects on the eastern seaboard that are not owned and developed by European companies? Will those European companies tend to rely on European equipment? And if so, will that present a problem for jobs, training, etc.?
Yes. So there is going to be one project that is going to be owned by, it's actually owned by Dominion Energy, which is the utility down in Virginia. Now they're going to develop the project with support from European wind farm creators, because of the fact that that's just where the expertise is right now. This, like I said, it's an extremely inherently risky industry, and the Europeans have been creating these things for 30 years. So they know how to do it. They know how to do it well. They know how to do it safely. They know how to do it in an environmentally responsible manner. So as of right now, we do have to use a lot of European expertise. Like I said, again, what my company is trying very hard to do is running around and getting as many American companies interested educated and trained, so then they are able to do as much of the work here as possible. I have a second point I wanted to make about that. And it's going to need to happen. So right now, while we are relying on European expertise for a lot of this stuff, they also need us to figure out how to do this ourselves, because like I showed you, the UK is building new turbines at an exponential rate. Germany is building new turbines at an exponential rate. The Netherlands, Belgium, soon there's going to be wind turbines off the Irish coast, off the Polish coast, off the Portuguese coast, off the Spanish coast. There's too much activity right now. So the Europeans need us to also build up our industry here in the United States, or else they're not going to actually, they don't have the ability, they're going to be spread too thin, and they're not going to have the ability to actually do all these things. So yes, as of right now, this is going to be dominated by European companies. We're trying to change that, but that doesn't mean that we're not also capturing a large amount of the benefits here in the United States. We talked about how 5,000 jobs are going to be created here in Maryland. In Maryland, not even, you know, up and down the East Coast. Maryland businesses are going to be building stuff for Massachusetts wind farms, for Rhode Island wind farms, for Virginia wind farms. And we're getting the benefit of clean energy. We're going to get 100% renewable clean energy from these projects. And like we talked about, we not only need it to clean our air as of right now, but we're also facing this problem where we have so many power plants that are going offline that we need these things just to replace the power that we have right now. So we're going to capture a lot of those benefits here in the United States as we build these things.
Thank you. So it sounds like the United States is currently lagging behind, but it has the potential with as much offshore that we have and the industry we have to catch up.
And it's very developing industry too. So it has been around for 30 years. It's very mature in Europe, but there's a lot of problems that exist that need to be solved. So there's a lot of data work and IT work, and there's a lot of research that still needs to go into this to make them work as, you know, as well as intended, and, you know, what impacts that there are. You know, there's technology solutions to minimize any kind of impacts. But I talked about the fact that there's a large continental shelf. We don't have that shelf in California. There's zero shelf in California. It's just like you're in California and it just goes like that. And you can't drill down, you can't put anything on the bottom. It's just way too deep. So there's a whole nother industry coming up. We call it floating platforms. And these floating platforms are in early R&D stages. They're building one up in Maine currently right now. And that's the next wave. And while we may be behind, you know, the industry as a whole, there's still going to be a lot of emerging technologies that are going to demand things like American R&D and American invention.
Thank you. This is a good transition to the next question. Dave asked, what countries are the leaders, which I believe we discussed a little bit in that chart. Mm-hmm. What can we learn from others? And can the Eastern Shore be an innovation hub for offshore wind?
Yeah, I think I touched on pretty much everything that question asked. The leaders right now, the United Kingdom, Germany, Denmark, that part of Europe is a leader right now. China is going to be building these things like crazy. Like China has seen the potential that offshore wind offers, not only in job creation, but just renewable energy development. And they're just going to go crazy for the next couple of years. But we're going to see wind turbines in places like Vietnam and Australia and Brazil. You know, this anyone with a coast is going to understand that this is a great renewable energy resource. It has to be done, you know, a lot of the production has to be done close to it so that everyone is going to capture jobs associated with it. And everyone is going to move forward. But like we talked about, there's still a lot of opportunities for innovation. The Biden-Harris administration is looking at offshore wind as a potential industry that they can develop, but also encourage companies to become exporters of talent and skills and services and R&D too.
Thank you. The next question is, what power storage options will be available from this project?
Yeah, another area of absolute R&D need. So offshore wind is a great resource because the wind blowing in the ocean is pretty constant, especially when you're building these things, 18 miles out like we're doing here in Maryland. You're going to have a pretty consistent wind source that is constantly producing energy. But with any renewable energy, there's potential where, well, the wind just doesn't blow one day, or there's no sun, so your solar panels, you need to figure out how to produce the energy in a renewable fashion, but also how to create a storage option. So then on days when you need power and it's cloudy, so your solar panel doesn't work, that you have a storage capacity that you can draw from. So battery development is huge. It's going to be something that we talk about every single day in the United States for the next 10 years as we're building out renewable energy. There's a very new, I don't want to confuse this too much, but there's a very new potential industry in hydrogen. So you put a hydrogen is a type of gas that burns 100% clean. So it's always been this desire to turn it into, we need gas for cars, we need gas for boats, we need gas for all these different things. And if you can create a fuel that burns 100% clean, then, that's great. It takes a lot of energy to create hydrogen though. And there has been a lot of talk about utilizing offshore wind turbines because they can generate so much energy that you can use those to produce hydrogen. So it's another way of storing energy, but that's a couple years off. They're experimenting with that right now. I think it's still to be seen if that's going to work or not, to tell you the truth.
Thank you. The next question is just asking you to respond to a couple of the points that are raised by opposition to offshore wind here on the Eastern Shore and across Maryland. So I'll read them off, give you a chance to respond, and go on to the next one. The first one, and please let us know if anything that is said here is by all means false.
Mm-hmm.
The first point they like to make is the steel and wind turbines cost more energy to produce than the windmill can generate in its expected lifetime. Is that a true statement?
No. So that is, there's a term for it. It's, I have it on a piece of paper, hold on. Buyback periods. It's a carbon buyback period. So they've measured how much carbon it takes to actually build these things, and that's in emissions, that's in digging stuff out of the ground, that's in making the steel, that's in assembling the steel, etc. So it's going to create an amount of carbon to be able to install a wind turbine, and every single study pegs it as it takes about 6 months of an offshore wind turbine's operation to recoup that carbon cost. And then these turbines are going to be operational for at least 20 years. It could be 30 years. We're not quite sure yet. At least 20 years. So you have a period of 19 and a half years in which you're sort of on the positive side of all this. So everything that, all of the renewable energy that you're generating is actually clean. So there's about a 6-month period where you need to recoup the cost, and then everything after that you can consider clean renewable energy. That's a good question because it's also very hard to figure out. So there's been, I think I've read about 6 or 7 different studies trying to answer that question, and they all came out to about the same thing, which is like kind of 5 to 10 months, so like 6 months ish. And that's true for anything. So that's true for solar. I think solar is like a year and a half. I think onshore wind is about a year that you need it to be operational to recoup the cost to produce it. And the reason that offshore wind is a little bit shorter than all of those is mainly because its ability to generate a massive amount of power. And you know, there's some statistic out there where they say that you know, every revolution, oh, I'm going to screw it up, but it's essentially like every revolution, you know, can power like 10 homes or something like that.
Yeah, fantastic. And the next question is, wind turbines are a national security threat because they interfere with radar. Is that an accurate statement?
Sort of. There is a radar interference problem that exists right now that everyone is trying to solve. It's every single country is trying to solve this. So, you know, they're building these like crazy off the European coast. They're building these off the Chinese coast. This is a problem that everyone needs to figure out how to solve. They're in the process of solving it right now. And but what it is because I can't see my hand because of my background, so I apologize. So as the turbine is spinning and you're sending radar signals into it, it can sort of deflect those or give like a wrong reading or something like that. And, you know, it's a somewhat small, not a somewhat small problem, but it's a very localized problem because it's only where the wind turbine is. But essentially every single country is figuring out how to solve that right now. The United States and the United Kingdom are working closely together on this. But to answer this question in another way, you know, the military would not let us be doing this if they were really absolutely concerned about that too. The military would have stopped this years ago and said that this was too much of a national security concern if they were really, if they were as worried about it too.
Fantastic. And then the next question is, what happens when there is too much wind, as in a Category 4 or 5 hurricane? What I do want to mention before you answer that question is I do remember that the Ørsted project is built to withstand a Category 4 hurricane and will shut down after 50+ mile per hour winds. So that's at least from the Ørsted side of things, but I'll let you answer the broader question.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And you know, they design these things with extreme weather in mind. So they study wind speeds, they study tidal waves, they study the potential for some sort of extreme weather event, and they build to withstand that. I mean, we're talking about, you know, there are thousands of wind turbines in the North Sea, and the North Sea is not a hospitable place whatsoever. They don't get hurricanes like we do, but it is extremely cold. It is an extremely rough sea. It's really bad. And, you know, they have wind turbines down in Antarctica too. So it's if you can understand what the risk is, you can train for it, or train for it. You can build for it. And there are, like I said, there are 2 turbines off the Virginia coast right now, and those have gone through hurricanes already, and they ended up being fine.
And fantastic. The next question is, what happens to the turbines when they reach the end of their lifespan?
We don't totally know yet because it's such a new industry that that problem solving is being developed right now. So that first offshore wind turbine that I showed you in Denmark, they decommissioned it a couple years ago after 30 years, 27 years of service or something like that. So there's when these companies petition the federal government to actually build these things, they actually have decommissioning plans as part of their plan. So they actually have a plan of like, this is what we're going to do with everything. As it gets closer, they may change those depending on building techniques at 30 years in the future. or the desires of local stakeholders. So, they have driven things and, they have put things into the ground to anchor them. They could leave them there, way below the surface, but they could leave them there because it has turned out to be an especially great haven for fishes to hang out at. And they decide that the ecological value of keeping it there may outweigh the value of, taking, the effort that you need to do to take it out. And some of these may just be like repurposing them, or they may just be reconstructing them, or they may be, we have to take a couple of the blades off, but the rest of it is okay, or we need to replace this thing, but the foundation is still okay. So, even if they're at the end of their life cycle, they're still usable. So that is a question that is kind of starting to be answered right now.
Fantastic. The next question is, it is said that, or opposition to this these wind turbines say each windmill contains 100 gallons of lubrication oil, which could catch fire. Is that inaccurate in both terms of it could catch fire, and is there that much oil inside these turbines?
I don't know how much oil is in those turbines, and I have to say I have never heard of one catching fire. I don't know if that's true or not. I just haven't heard of it. Like I said, the federal government really looks at all possible impacts that they have. So one thing that they did is a study, I think it was for the North Atlantic projects, but they did a study back in like 2010 or something like that. And what they really looked at is the chance for an oil spill compared to normal boating traffic over a 30-year period. So it's not so much that, there's oil in the nacelle and something can go wrong with the nacelle and it can leak. There's a lot of boats on the water too. And those boats can run into other boats and those boats could crash. And then, those things have oil too. So the federal government really looked at that. They studied the potential impact that hurricanes could have, like the hurricane blows over something. And I'm going to read from it right now. 2006 study found an extremely small chance of a spill compared to normal boating traffic over a 30-year period. Now, I talked about the health and safety components of what they want to do with the installation. So the federal government is essentially saying that like that there will be less of a chance of a spill than your normal boaters, because these are going to be highly trained and highly regulated ship captains that are going to be, we saw the video of like just how complex it is to install those things on the ocean. So all of these companies are going to be very aware of all those logistical challenges and really want to ensure that nothing can go wrong. So they're going to be prioritizing health. They're going to be prioritizing safety. So the federal government looks at that and looks at how many oil spills happen all the time because of an old boat is leaky, or an old boat, just stops working, or some sort of, disaster happens. And they say that this is going to be, what I say, extremely small chance compared to normal boating traffic.
Thank you. I did want to do a time check because we did just hit the hour mark. Sam, how good are you on time?
Good. I can keep on going for a little while. These are really good questions. And the whole point of this is that we really want to, we don't have these things yet in the United States. So there's always going to be a bunch of questions about, the what ifs. And it's our goal here to shed some light on this information. And, hopefully with having answers question, then, you become a little bit more familiar because you've heard an answer, but also, you can be excited about these things getting built.
Well, fantastic. Well, you heard the man. Keep them coming, folks. The next question I have is, opposition says it cost $1 million to replace a windmill's bearing, and other maintenance costs are far too high. Would you say that is an accurate statement?
I don't know how much it costs to repair all these things, but there's two ways of looking at it. The companies had to bid into getting ORECs from the state of Maryland. So they have an understanding of how much things cost themselves. And they factor that into their production, and they factor that into their budgeting, and they factor that into their actual bids to build these things. So they're focused on keeping their costs down because it's a company and they just want to keep their costs down. But like we talked about, there's going to be a big need for operations and maintenance because everything breaks at some point and everything needs to be replaced. And those are jobs that are going to be Ocean City jobs. Those are technicians that are going to be living or working out of the port of Ocean City. And like we saw with the Uber driver, they're going to take a boat out to the turbine and see what's wrong and, make any adjustments that they need to make.
Fantastic. And could you talk with the numbers that you do have on you? What exactly would be the economic impact from these projects here on the Eastern Shore or in Maryland as general? Do you have those numbers on you?
I don't think I have it broken down into, how many jobs are created where, but it's an understanding that it's going to be 5,000, nearly 5,000, like 4,977, nearly 5,000 jobs here in the state of Maryland. Some of those jobs are going to be temporary. Some of those are going to be temporary construction jobs. Some of those are going to be shorter term manufacturing jobs because, sort of once you build the thing, you don't need to keep building it. You only have to make so many of them. But a good deal of those jobs are, like I said, are going to be running out of the Eastern Shore because they're going to be needing to maintain these things for upwards of 20, 25 years. So it's a lot of it, and that's 20 to 25 years worth of jobs that are going to be located on the Eastern Shore. I don't think anyone is going to have that. Any other places in Maryland are going to have that certainty. Now, ACP, it's American Clean Power, they have a number of fact sheets and information sheets on their website. That's great. That's great for this. And then the Maryland government too will have a couple websites themselves. I think that they're updating theirs though soon, but they have some information on there. But
do you mind if I put your email in the chat?
Oh yeah, please. I see something from Andy. Are you concerned about transmission capacity? Yes. That is what we talked about, risks. That is one of the big risks. So the way that they structured the law is that a company can receive these ORECs to produce this power, and they have to meet a number of conditions. And one of the conditions is that they need to essentially hook up to the power grid on the Delmarva Peninsula. It seems like that's going to be done somewhere near the Dover in the Delaware area. But the way that our energy system has been developed is that the transmission lines that we have close to the shore are not strong enough to kind of handle all of this power. And if you've been kind of following some of the political news, the Biden-Harris administration has been really focused on getting, and it's billions, it's so much money, it's billions of dollars to upgrade our transmission lines, not just here, but all across the United States. So not only is transmission capacity an issue, so transmission capacity is like, like electricity is like an electrons, like how many electrons can you put on the power lines that go from the Delmarva Peninsula to Baltimore? And there's just a limited amount. So you need to upgrade those. But we have to do this anyway, because you all saw what happened in Texas. where freak winter storm knocked out power. We talk about reliability a lot, and it's a major concern in all of our power systems that we need to have systems that are hardened to extreme weather events, which we know are just becoming more common because of climate change. So this is a nationwide problem that needs solving, and we're one of the people who is worried about this problem. But the Biden-Harris administration is spending a lot of time talking about this, so it's good that there's national attention on this problem. I think that's it.
Fantastic. So we can go ahead and go into the wrap up for this evening.
Let me, I'm sorry, Jared. Thank you all. Thank you all very, very, very much. This is a passion of mine that we figure out a way to, move renewable energy forward and move offshore wind forward. And it's forums like this where we talk and we ask each other questions that, we all become very comfortable with it, and we can move forward, together doing this. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for, all of them. And it was very much a pleasure of allowing you to steal an hour of your time. I know it's dinner time for everyone. So thank you for letting me spend this hour with you and talking about this subject.
And I think I speak for everyone on the shore that you, Sam, for taking the time out. I do want to highlight one more time our fantastic co-sponsors for tonight's event. I'm going to be asking each of them. So if you're a member of that, any of these organizations, please email me. I want to make sure I get your information to everyone who attended tonight. But the Sierra Club of Maryland, the Maryland Legislative Coalition, CCAN, Dorchester Democratic Central Committee, All Revolution Maryland, Democratic Club of Wacomico County, the Democratic Women's Club of Worcester County, Progressive Maryland, Indivisible, Kent and Queen Anne's, the Wacomico Environmental Trust. I want to once again thank you all for helping share the word about this, and please send me some information so I can get out to everyone who attended tonight. Offshore wind is a new industry. It's a complex industry. We would like to make this a series, and hopefully Sam will want to come back with us in a couple months, and maybe we can get the two companies themselves to come have a chat with us. But I want to thank everyone for coming out. If you have any questions, please feel free to email Sam. His email's in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to the Lower Shore Progressive Caucus. Our email is lowershoreprogressivecaucus@gmail.com. Or you can find us Facebook, Twitter, any social media really. But with that, I hope everyone has a good evening, and everyone stays safe. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn for the evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again. And thank you, Jared. And thank you, everyone at Lower Shore Progressives. This was
we had
gracious hosts you guys were.
We had a really decent turnout, about 48 people at the peak, and it stayed like 40s the whole time. So I hope it was, a good investment of your time as well.
Yeah, no. Talking to one person is a worthy investment. Okay, I'm going to sign off, but let's keep in touch, Jared. And
thanks a lot, Sam. That was great.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close it for the night. Thanks, everyone. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out by email, Facebook, social media, or text or call me. Thanks, everyone.